This last week, my family and Lindley's parents and Lindley's brother, we were all around a campfire on the banks of the Rio Frio River one night. And Caden, our youngest, he's 12. He had a buddy there with him for the week. And so there were 9 of us surrounding the campfire. And the reason we did the campfire on the banks of the river in the middle of the summer is because we wanted s'mores. Any fans of s'mores out there? Man, I love those things. They're not good for you, so you can't eat them, but once or twice a week. And when you do, you can't eat but like 4 or 5 at a time. So we're sitting around there and we're doing s'mores. We got it all going. The marshmallows are cooking, and somebody had this idea like the day before when we were planning out the campfire night and the s'mores that maybe it would be really good to try, instead of the chocolate bar. Isn't it just torture for the guy to start out talking about food, Instead of the chocolate bar, to substitute Rolos. And so we thought, man, that would be really good to try it. So we took all of our gear down to the fire. We had, our deals, the metal things for putting the marshmallows on. We had the chocolate bars. We had the Rolos. We had everything. And so we start off with the regular s'mores because we want to, get that on our palate and then compare that to the Rolo s'mores. And so we do the regular s'mores. Now, I have a different method than anybody else in my family. I don't know how they're unaware of this reality, but somehow it had missed all of them. When I do s'mores, I do the bottom graham cracker piece and then the chocolate bar and then the roasted marshmallows, but no top graham cracker. All right? So that's how I'm doing. I'm eating like that. And so everybody else doing it the normal way, a bottom graham cracker piece and a top graham cracker piece. So everybody's doing that. We go through the regular s'mores, then we get to the Rolos, and the Rolos kind of get a thumbs down. It's just not the same. It just kind of gets drowned out in the marshmallows. You can't really get the Rolo flavor. And so that was really a bummer. Then all of a sudden somebody goes, hey, what if we put the Rolo on top of the chocolate bar? And so we take a graham cracker bottom, we put the chocolate bar on it, and the roll on top of that. You put it on a rock next to the fire so that it gets real melted, Then you cook your marshmallows. You put your marshmallows on there. Then everybody else there would take a top graham cracker piece, pull it off the metal thing, and then bite into it. And man, the Rolo chocolate bar marshmallow combination, out of this world. It's so incredible. We decided we had to name it. And so we named it the Smolo. And it was just awesome. Now, while this is unfolding, think about this. We've tried the s'mores, and some people have tried them more than once. And then we've tried the Smolos, and some people like that so much they've tried that more than once. So we're like stuffed with all this great, nutritious food. And we're sitting around, and at this point, I make it known, you people have done this all wrong. You should have been eating this without the top graham cracker piece. And somebody says, you really are doing that? I'm like, yeah, that's how I always have done it. I love it that way. Well, why do you like it that way? Then I proceed to make my defense for the Smolo without the top graham cracker piece. And here's the essence of my defense. If you put the graham cracker top on and you bite into that thing, everything's melted except the graham crackers. So what's that going to create? A major problem, because you bite down and it just smashes it down, and you've got chocolate and marshmallow coming out all over. It's a complete wreck, and all the best stuff is escaping out the sides of the graham cracker. Have you experienced this? And the other thing that's really bad about that is your first bite into the Smolo is really prevented from having the full sensation of all these amazing tastes by the graham cracker. You remove the top graham cracker and it's like taste overload. Your taste buds hit the marshmallow, the Rolo, the chocolate, and then the graham cracker creates the foundation. It's in its rightful place. And so that is so everybody starts doing that. It's just like crazy. This is the best ever. So everybody overdoses again on Smolos, and it's a great experience. Now, why in the world am I telling you that? Because I'm mean. So mean. Now, here's the deal. We went to the river to make s'mores. We ended up with something better. It's not that s'mores are not great. They're great, but what we ended up with was something even better. And you think about your life. Isn't your life partly about a quest for something better? I mean, look around you every day. All of the modern conveniences that you enjoy in your house or your automobile is because somewhere along the way, someone decided to try something better. I mean, you go about your day every week this week and you look around you and you ask yourself the question, how much of what I experience today is because somebody somewhere had a thought of something better? I've got a friend who evidently grew tired of going into the gas station to pay for his gas, and he actually created pay at the pump at the gas station. See, everybody's always thinking of something better. Now, put yourself in the position of being an Israelite. And let's say you've grown up your whole life. You're 40, 50, 60 years old. You've been an Israelite in the Old Testament times your entire life. And year after year, decade after decade, you're a part of a ritual that is meant to make atonement for your sins. But you know that that atonement for your sins is insufficient, temporary at best. And the reason you know it is because you've got to participate in the same ritual year after year after year. I think that it's just a part of who we are to look for something better. If you're an Israelite and you've been doing that same ritual decade after decade after decade, wouldn't you be wondering, isn't there something better? And yet the problem would be that God is the one who gave you the instructions to perform the rituals. Well, how could there be something better if God was the one that told you what to do? Unless what God told you to do was really intended to point you towards something better. So you be ready to recognize it when He brought it. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 5. And let's start by reading verses 1 through 4. Hebrews chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. For every high priest is taken from among men, is appointed on behalf of men in things pertaining to God, so that He might offer gifts and sacrifices on behalf of sin. He is able to deal gently with the ignorant and those who've gone astray, since He Himself is beset with weakness. On account of weakness, He is obligated to offer sacrifices for sin. In the same way, for the people, He also offers for Himself. And no one takes honor for himself, but is called by God, just as also Aaron. So Aaron sets this whole thing up. Aaron is appointed by God to be the first high priest over Israel, who's making sacrifices on behalf of the people because of their sins. Now think about it. That's incredible that God would appoint someone to make sacrifices for everybody so that their sins don't stand in the way of relating to God as their God and them as His people. This is an amazing honor that Aaron received. It's not one that Aaron said, hey, I am worthy of that honor. I have merited that honor. I have earned that honor. Appoint me. I'm the guy. No, Aaron was not like that. He didn't merit the honor. He didn't deserve it. God appointed Aaron to be this position, this high priest. Amazing honor because of the purposes and the plans of God, the goodness and the grace of God to His people. amazing plan that he enabled his people in the midst of their sin to still have relationship with him. And he did it through appointing a man from among them to be the one who makes sacrifices on their behalf because of their sins. And Aaron was that one who received that honor. And then following Aaron, his sons, and then it keeps going down the family line so that each priest is appointed by God, given this honor to function in this way, to make sacrifices for the people. And so what happened was, on the 10th day of the 7th month of every year, the priest would take a bull and would sacrifice that bull for his own sins and for the sins of his household. See, he would have to make sacrifices for himself because he was beset with weakness. He had sin in his own life that he had to take care of before he went to God for the people. So he went to God on behalf of himself, made a sacrifice, took care of his own sins, and then he took a goat and he sacrificed the goat as a sin offering for the people of Israel. And then he took another goat and he stood over that goat and he confessed the sins of the people over that goat. This goat was called the scapegoat. And this goat was then sent out into the wilderness to bear the sins of the people. And the people experienced atonement for their sins so that the remainder of the year they could experience fellowship with the Lord until the next day of atonement, where they go through the same ritual. Incredible and amazing that God would do that for his people. And yet, the blood of bulls and goats did not create a remedy for sin. They had to do it every year, over and over again. Every new high priest had to learn the ritual and lead the people through it, because what they were doing, though amazing and incredible in and of itself, was insufficient to remedy the sins of the people. There had to be a better way. There had to be something more. Now, the priest was a pretty amazing idea that God created, because he chose from among the people someone to offer sacrifices. And the beauty of that was that the priest was able to deal gently with the people and their failures. That the priest was able to understand and be compassionate, to be patient with the people who were going astray and ignorant and found in sin. He was able to offer sacrifices for them in compassion, because he was from among them. He was just like them. He was a person in their life, in their scenarios, and experiencing many of their same sins. The fact that he was also a sinner and from among them made him able to understand and be compassionate. As good as that is, it always also points to something that is lacking. Do you see how short this whole system falls through the idea that the priest has to offer a sacrifice for himself before he offers a sacrifice for the people? So that means that the sacrifice he's offering for the people, insufficient in the blood of the bulls and goats alone, is also insufficient because it's being offered by someone who has to offer a sacrifice for himself. I mean, who's the guy that's offering the sacrifice for the priest? The priest has got to be thinking year after year, offering sacrifices for himself. There's got to be someone to offer sacrifice for me. See, the priest gets his sacrifice, his sins taken care of, and then he's able to offer sacrifices for the people, but there's no one to offer sacrifice for him whose sins are taken care of. It's an incredible system, an incredible plan, but it's a plan that is insufficient because it's pointing to something better. And here we stand at this point in history, the same perspective that the readers of Hebrews would have, and we know that something better has come. His name is Jesus. Look at Hebrews chapter 5, Verse 5. In the same way, Jesus also does not glorify himself to become high priest, but he has spoken to him. You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Just as also in another place he says, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. He, in the day of his flesh, offered prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who is able to save him from death. And he was heard on account of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through the things he suffered. And becoming perfect, he became to all those who obey him the cause of eternal salvation, being designated by God high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Jesus Christ did not seek out the honor of which he was worthy. Jesus was worthy to be called high priest. He didn't seek it out. He was appointed, and the author of Hebrews gives us an incredible description of that appointment. He quotes from Psalm chapter 2, and he says, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Now, this is the second time we've seen this quote from Psalm chapter 2. We saw it before in Hebrews chapter 1. In Hebrews chapter 1, we remember that the emphasis in the first part of Hebrews was on the sonship of Jesus Christ. That Jesus Christ was preeminent over all things, all people, all history, all creation, because he's the Son of God. He's greater than the angels. He's more significant than Moses. He is the Son of the living God. And here we were reminded in this transition point in chapter 5 back to the emphasis in the first part of Hebrews on the sonship of Jesus Christ. In this term that today I've begotten you, just in the same way that in chapter 1 it was clear that Jesus was not the one created by God, but the one with God who created all things. Here in chapter 5, it is again emphasizing not that Jesus was created. Hebrews has made it very clear that Jesus is the creator, but that Jesus is preeminent over all creation. That there's nobody like Jesus. There's nobody else who's been given the name Son. And so when God is talking about Jesus' appointment to the high priesthood that we see in the line of Aaron, God the Father says something about Jesus that makes him distinct from Aaron. This one is my son. There's no one like him. So Jesus is receiving an honor of being high priest. And the first thing that we're told about Jesus that sets him apart from the Old Testament, so that we understand that what the author of Hebrews is telling us, that there is a better way, and his name is Jesus, is that there's no one like Jesus Christ. He's the Son of God. And then in verse 6, we see the transition that we're making into focusing on the high priesthood of Jesus Christ. We've heard about it a little bit before this in earlier chapters of Hebrews. Now, chapter 5, verse 6 is transitioning us to focus in on Jesus' high priesthood and what that means for you and for me. In chapter 5, verse 6, he says, just as also said in another place, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Now, in chapter 7 of Hebrews, we're going to get into the whole Melchizedek thing really deep, okay? So we'll kind of hold all of our questions, and we're wondering about this until chapter 7. But just so you understand what's happening here in chapter 5, the emphasis here in chapter 5 is on the perpetual nature of the priesthood of Melchizedek. Melchizedek was a priest in the days of Abraham. He and Abraham had some interaction. And we learned some things about a priesthood that is outside the line of Aaron. Remember, the Old Testament prescription is that Aaron and then all of his descendants are appointed as priests. Well, there's somebody that's not in that lineage. It's outside that lineage that has this interaction with Abraham, which is way before Moses and Aaron. All right, get your timeline down here. That has this interaction, not in that line of priests, and there's no record of beginning of his life, any genealogy. So there's this sense that it's a perpetual office that he holds. It's not like the office of the Aaronic priesthood. And so chapter 5 brings out that Jesus Christ, being the Son of God, holds a priesthood perpetually. He's not like anything else that's ever happened. He's different. He's better. He's the better way. He's not like us. He's the Son of God, and he holds his office forever. Aaron was one of the people, and he died. And the best he could do was offer temporary solutions that cried out for something better. Jesus comes along. He's the Son of God. He's not in the lineage of Aaron. He is forever. He's the Son of God. He's better. Verse 7 turns our focus to the days of Jesus' flesh. Okay, so verse 5 and 6, he's not like us. He's the Son of God. He can hold a forever priesthood, unlike what Aaron could accomplish. He's something better because of who he is. But he becomes like us. Jesus is the Son of God, not like us, but he took on flesh and became like us. See, in the days of his flesh, and then this next several verses emphasizes his humanity. He cries out with loud cries, wanting to be delivered, saved from death. He's going to face death. He's crying out. He's praying. He's being heard. Why? Because of his reverence, his submission, his obedience. Now, this is just an aside, but I want to give you this little thought on your prayer life. Jesus Christ was heard in his prayers because of his reverent submission to the Father. Please don't mistake that as meaning that you will be heard in your prayers when you are as good as you possibly can be. Now just follow this thought. Jesus Christ is our high priest. See? And you're going to see as we work through the rest of this passage how this really affects your prayer life. When you pray, you know why God hears you? Same reason he heard Jesus. Because of Jesus' reverence, not yours. He's our high priest. He's something better. I hope you're encouraged to pray. Because he'll hear you. Because of the reverence of Christ. See, this passage emphasizes Jesus' humanity. That he suffered. That he learned obedience through his suffering. What we're needing to see here is that Jesus Christ is not like us, and that's why he can be a sufficient priest. But he is like us, and that's why he can be a sufficient priest. He's never going to die. His priesthood is forever. He's not from among us. He's the Son of God, and yet he becomes like us, and he is beset with weaknesses in his flesh. And he is able to be compassionate and gentle and understanding with us, but in a far superior way than the Old Testament priest. Now, the Old Testament priest gets you because he's got failures. But you know what? His compassion and his patience is all tainted with his own sin. Every bit of it. No matter how much the Old Testament priest can understand you, his ability to offer sacrifices for you in an understanding way is all tarnished by his own sinfulness. He can never be what is meant or needed to be for your sin. But Jesus Christ, he becomes like us. And in verse 15 of chapter 4, we are reminded again that he is perfect. that he never sinned, that all of his suffering was never tainted by his own sinfulness, that he's absolutely perfect. And what that means is that Jesus Christ can understand you, can relate to you, can offer compassion to you in perfection, that he can be patient with you perfectly. Now think about the people who are most compassionate and understanding around you in life. If you're facing cancer, then I suspect the people who would be most compassionate and understanding toward you will offer the greatest amount of comfort to you is somebody who's had cancer. If you lose a spouse, the people who can offer great comfort to you are those who have lost a spouse. Do you notice how the people who suffer a lot can really give a lot of compassion towards those who suffer? There's a guy named David, and I read his story in a book, and he was fighting in the Vietnam War. And he was in this skirmish, and he was going to throw a phosphorus grenade, and right when he's about to throw it, a bullet hit the grenade and exploded right next to his face. And it removed half of his face. And he survived through it, but he is horribly disfigured. And this is what he says. After the fact, this is what he says. Remember, half his face is gone. This is a quote. "I am twice the man today as I was before the war." He said, "God has used my suffering so that I understand the pain of people around me. And I want people to know Christ." See? Suffering enables you to relate to others who suffer. There is nobody in all of history who has suffered like Jesus Christ. There is nobody in all of history who has been perfect and become the sins of all people in all history. There's nobody who has bore the weight of the guilt and the sin like Jesus. There's nobody who has heard the words from the Heavenly Father, "You are guilty with everybody else's sin, and you're paying for it." Nobody has suffered like Jesus. And it's in his suffering that he learned obedience. He learned how to live as a man, trusting in the Father. And so that means he can perfectly relate to each and every one of us. And he does it in perfection. Everything you face, everything you battle, everything that hurts you, everything in your humanity, Jesus understands. From perfection, he is the better way. This passage says that Jesus cried out, loud cries and tears, to the one who could save him from death, and he was heard. Isn't that a strange way to phrase the answer to Jesus' prayers, to the one who could save him from death? He died. He's crying out to the one who could save him from death, and he died. And yet the passage tells us that he was answered because of his reverence. How is that? Let's think about what's happening in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus is crying out, "Father, if you can take this cup from me, take it. If there's no other way, then your will be done." What happens immediately after that? Angels come and strengthen Jesus. Jesus cried out to the one who could save him from death, and he was answered. "You're going to die, but I'm here with you." On the cross, Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He was answered. See, shortly after that, Jesus cries out, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." And what happens on day 3? Jesus Christ breaks out of that grave, because the one who could save him from death raised him from the dead. And that means that there is no one like Jesus Christ, that he is the better way, and that his priesthood is forever and totally sufficient. See, Jesus Christ was perfected or qualified to become high priest by his obedience and death, so that he was perfect to represent us, being a man, and perfect to actually be the sacrifice. See, the Old Testament was pointing to something better. The Old Testament priests had to make sacrifices for themselves and then for the people. That's a problem. There's a sacrifice missing there somewhere. It's insufficient. But Jesus, having never sinned, was able to represent for us, make a sacrifice on our behalf without having to make a sacrifice for himself. And because of how he lived in perfection, he was able to do what no bull and no goat could ever do. He's able to shed the blood required for the forgiveness of our sins. He was perfect to represent and perfect to offer himself as the sacrifice. Jesus Christ, high priesthood, is our answer. He is the better way. And he becomes the cause of salvation for all those who believe or obey him. Now in Hebrews, we're going to see, especially when we get to chapter 11, that this concept of obeying the Lord and believing in the Lord are really synonymous. The whole communication of Hebrews chapter 11, the chapter about faith, is all built upon what they do in obedience. So when you read here that those who obey find the cause of their salvation as Christ, then understand that what Hebrews is communicating here is that those who find Christ as their high priest to be cause of their salvation, it shows. See, Jesus said it like this. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. I am the better way. And if you believe that, if Jesus Christ has become the cause of your salvation, then it shows. When you know the better way, you talk about it. I mean, if I got you right now to pull out your phones and you were to tell me some of the apps that you have on your phones, I bet you every one of you got those apps because someone told you about it. Because everybody's talking about a better way. Have you heard that about that app? That'll do that. And you get that app because somebody told you, because we're always talking about the better way. You ever build decks? You ever put together a deck with wood and stuff? Well, you know that today you don't use nails in a deck. Why? Because they've created deck screws. It's a better way. We're always talking about a better way. That's what we do. We talk about a better way. There's a lady in Dallas years ago who was a secretary at a bank. And she worked on electronic typewriters where you had to where you made mistakes and they were permanent on that paper. Well, she also was an artist and had worked with oil painting. And because she had worked with oil painting, she knew that an oil painting is only corrected by painting over the mistake. And so she started thinking, well, could I paint over some of the mistakes that I make on the paper when I'm typing with the typewriter? So she mixed up this stuff with some oil paints, and it worked. It covered up the mistake, and she put it in a little bottle so she could take it to work, and she discovered something better. And so she'd make a mistake on her deal. She'd take it and just get the mistake out, and other secretaries started seeing this and hearing about it because she was sharing about something better. And next thing you know, she had other secretaries asking, can I get a bottle of that? She turned her kitchen into this little production facility. She started making the stuff and selling it, and she started making a fortune with the stuff she called mistake out. Pretty soon, other people found out about it because everybody was talking about something better. A company comes in and buys her out for $47 million, and you know that product as Whiteout. How did that happen? Because we like to talk about something better. That's it. Do you know there are people around you every single day who are dealing with the pain of their brokenness, their sin, and this world's brokenness. And they need a better way. They need something that will white out their sin. And if you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, it shows. you talk about a better way. I want to encourage you today. As you contemplate Jesus Christ, would you also contemplate on how it's showing? Are you talking about a better way? That's what we do if we believe it. And there's no one like Jesus Christ.